So there is this new variant that's around, but I think important just to start off to emphasize that it's a subvariant. In other words, it's a variation of the Omicron variant. So the Omicron variant has been around since the end of 2022, and we've had since then various subvariants. So it's still the same strain, if you like, of COVID, but it's a new subvariant. It is more infectious than other subvariants, but all the information we have now suggests that it's not more severe. So that is at least reassuring.
The abused women. The abused women and children at the Ihata shelter in Hedefeld are calling on you to restore their dignity. With the month of August meant to commemorate the sacrifices women have made for the country, VOC has partnered with the Ihata shelter to celebrate females who have overcome hardships, and one way you can help is by donating sanitary towels, deodorant, body sprays, lotions, toothpaste, face cloths, soaps, toiletries, or any form of toiletry products until the 21st of August 2023.
He explained the exact situation. So this is a sort of reality that we're living in modern times, that everything is upside down. And when I say upside down, I really do mean upside down. And it's it, it, it's no wonder that people, especially young men now growing up, are having so much pressure, and they're being overwhelmed with mental health issues because they don't know where they stand.
Sure.
Because, and obviously it goes both ways, but especially for young men who do not know how to express, and especially if you come from certain cultures, you're not taught to express or feel vulnerable, express your vulnerabilities, which is causing even more problems within young men. But yes, it's definitely something that I've seen right across. I mean, I'm British, as you can probably tell by my accent. I'm born and raised in Scotland. So for many years, I understand the British way of life and the culture. But for the last 8 years, I've been in the US, and I've seen it. It's exact same. In mainland Europe, it's the same now. And because of smart tech, everywhere it's going across the board.
Would you say that's because we've become more of a global village, and so we're sharing? It used to be that we all had our own individual cultures, but now it's kind of blending together.
Yes.
Because you know, and we don't want to mention the differences, but someone is listening to Lil Wayne in China,
Yep,
you know,
exactly.
and someone is listening to a pop singer in Australia that's coming out of the UK. So
Yep,
basically, we become a melting pot. But with that, it seems that we've also, you know, kind of shared each other's traumas, each other's challenges, and all of the other things, you know, that comes with that kind of society.
Mohammed Fasik, I just want to latch on to something that you've mentioned, the village, and seeing that there are people, and as a couple, that they travel all the time. And I think what is important, because we've got youngsters, single gentlemen here in studio also, and sort of on a global scale also, the sort of courting and dating dilemma that we currently find, that's there for young people today.
Yeah. So look, this is something that I talk about a lot, and I even discuss it in my book. Way back before I moved to the US, I published a book, and I interviewed over 500 couples just to get the research in to be able to publish the book. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned from that research, and this is very important, is that patterns don't lie. And I'm going to repeat that: patterns don't lie. And so one of the biggest patterns that I've realized throughout the Muslim world now, when it comes to marriage, is this courting dilemma that you're asking about. And I'm going to break it down very quickly for the listeners. I've sort of like analyzed, and I've split it into 3 groups when it comes to the Muslims now. So when let's talk about the courting stage for a Muslim. There's 3 groups. So group 1, they're the group where there'll be a young couple, they meet either at university, or they're introduced via family or matrimonial site. So what happens is that they'll meet each other, they'll realize that there's something there, there's some potential there, so they'll go back to their parents and they'll discuss it with their families, and then they'll get the families involved straight away. This is group 1 I'm talking about, yeah? And so what they'll do is that they'll have a dozen meetings with that individual, and after that dozen meetings, what they'll end up deciding is, yes, we've done our due diligence, we've asked all important questions, there's no emotional attachment, there's no physical attachment, because we have a safety net, we have our family involved, and everything is there. So what ends up happening is that after X amount of meetings, they either decide to move forward and get the nikah, or after that time they realize, nope, we're not actually compatible, there's not that much of a personality, sort of like we have more of a personality clash, then they move away and they carry on. That's group 1. Now, this is very interesting now. So that's group 1. Now, group 2 are the Muslim, the young Muslim man, girl, whether they're divorcee, actually also you can throw that into the mix. What ends up happening is that they'll meet each other, and these are practicing people I'm talking about now, people who come from a faith-based background. What will happen is that they're at university, they'll meet and they'll start chit-chatting. And you'll say, look, let's not get parents involved yet, because we're academically endowed, we're mature, we're intelligent, we know what we're doing. So let's just have a chit chat. Well, that turns on from a chit chat of a day or 2 to 3 months, 6 months of courting, which eventually what happens is this: it forms an emotional attachment. Once an emotional attachment is formed, what I teach is that it's game over. Because you can't recognize then red flags, you can't recognize amber flags, you don't know what's happening because you formed an attachment. And this group, this is the important part, is that sometimes, a lot of the times what happens is that they'll slip up. So I had a case just recently in the UK people involved with Islamic Society and university. Same thing happening. After 6 months, the brother said, look, after an Islamic event, I'll drop you home in a car. While he was in the car, as he parked up, he actually went over and he kissed the girl. So the first time after he kissed her, she froze, went back. And this is what I'm finding now. There's a lot of this scenario happening within the faith-based community. And then what it leads to is sometimes full-on intimacy. So from there, it becomes a fully fledged boyfriend-girlfriend situation. But group 2 is very interesting. Group 2 then, because they come from a cultural or faith-based background and they're practicing themselves, they suddenly realize what they've done. They back off and they actually have regret. They make tawbah, and this is a fork in the road. They either say, enough, we can't do this now, we're too deep, we're too emotionally attached. They back off and they leave it. They say, let's let this go. Or they'll say, no, we've done all our due diligence, fine, we've made a mistake, but we've made tawbah, but let's carry this forward, but let's do it in an amicable faith-based way now. So that's what they'll do. This is group 2. Now, group 3, okay, are the ones from the beginning, and these are people that are coming from Islamic families, do you understand? What will happen is that they'll meet, boy, girl will meet, whether they're divorcees or young students, whatever it is, they'll meet, and it's intense from the beginning. Full-on boyfriend-girlfriend situation, a lot of deception, lies to the family, and then eventually what happens, and when the families find out there's a full commotion, they start sort of like twisting their parents' arms, saying, if you do this, I'm going to run away, I'm going to call the authorities, I'm going to do this. So all of this mayhem, but they're fully invested sexually. So they have not only an emotional attachment, they have a physical attachment. That's the 3 groups. I've really summarized it. I give lectures on this, full seminars, yeah? I'll give you a very quick summary. Now, this is the important part. Out of all my years of doing this, and I've just finished my 2nd book, and I've just handed the sort of like manuscript over to my publisher, and I've got another 2 chapters on this in my new book. So basically what I've seen is that the majority of the people I'm dealing with over the years, guess what group they fall into now? Within the Muslim faith-based community. Do you know?
Number 3.
What do you think?
I would say number 3.
No, it's actually group number 2.
Alhamdulillah, at least it's not number 3.
So no. That's what I used to think. But actually group number 2 is for me more problematic. And I'll explain why, the psychology behind it. You need to take a step back and now realize what the hell is going wrong, where we feel now as a community that the youngsters, whether you're divorced, what is it that's your self-worth issues, your low self-esteem, your feeling of desperation, when you're coming from a faith-based perspective that you can go and you can get to a point where you're having fully formed attachments, which leads to physical attachments. Yes, the barakah is that they recognize that they make tawbah, but I'm saying to you the overwhelming cases. The number 3 is intense. Number 1 is very rare, but group 2 is becoming the mainstream. That's scary.
How much of this would you say is ignorance of deen, ignorance of knowledge and identity? Because it seems like the more we move away globally from our cultural identities to this more globalized identity, the more problems we pick up along the way. And certainly within Islam, we have great examples of Sahaba and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, an example of a man who was honoring his duty in all aspects and who was firmly grounded in who he was. And people who follow that path seem to maintain their identity. So are you saying with that, the fact that we find ourselves in the 2nd group means that we've started to move away from that ideal identity because we've become so globalized?
It's a multifaceted issue. It's the actual elephant in the room, to be honest. After much research, a lot of people don't talk about this. The reality is it's porn. And a lot of people sort of like sit back and say, what do you mean by porn? How can that be the root cause of what's happening within the Muslim community? But it actually is. Because through research now, what we're realizing is that the addiction problem is massive when it comes to the Muslim community, when it comes to porn. So what happens is that youngsters from the age of 12, 13 are watching porn. And then what ends up happening is that they slowly get to a point where they're watching porn to a point where it becomes an addiction. So what ends up happening now is that why is it that people are doing this in the courting stage, even when they're practicing Muslims? It's because they've rewired their brain. That dopamine rush now that they're needing is at next level, because the way porn works, the way addiction works is it'll start off with something like soft porn, for instance. Then your brain, the dopamine levels have hit its max. It needs a higher hit. So then it moves on to something from soft to hard, then from hard to extreme weird stuff like fetish. Then it moves on to massage parlors, escorts, prostitutes. This is what's actually happening at grassroots level. So what the reality now is that when people are moving into the courting stage, a lot of young men who find it difficult, and young women, because now the trend is moving with this sort of porn stuff with the sisters now, but still the majority of the case it's men. So what's happening now? Youngsters from the age of 12, 13, because of smart tech, they've got instant access to stuff that they shouldn't have. It's rewiring their brain. So what's now happening is that when they go to court a sister or be with a woman, they've got all of this stuff that's in their brain. So they do not have the boundaries now of respect. And so they've become so over-sexualized that they're taking risks. And this is why so many sisters are also coming to me saying, I've been played, I've done this, he's made a pass, he wants to make it sexualized, I want to get, do you understand? Because there's so much of that happening behind the scenes.
Of course, we are in studio with a special guest, Mr. Qasim. And of course, today we are speaking about a range of different things. We're looking at it from the male's perspective. We're speaking about courting right now and how, as a society and as a Muslim community, we are influenced by even pornography. Pornography is playing a huge role in our lives, even from a very early age, because it's becoming less and less sensitive for us to be able to look at these things, and more prolific in our experience. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue, and then I'm going to get some words from Mr. DM. Inshallah, stay with us right here on The Voice of the Cape.
We're back and ready to welcome you home. Your 3 favorite Spurs are ready to serve you your favorite meal for sit-down, deliveries, and call and collect orders. Visit any of your 3 favorite Spurs: Topeka Spur, Kenilworth, Golden Feather Spur, Vangate Mall, and California Spur, Westgate Mall, and treat yourself to breakfast, lunch, or supper. Remember, safety first, so we're sanitized and energized.
Spur, people with a taste for life.
Hey, I need a snack.
Easy noodles.
I've got no idea what to make for supper.
Easy noodles.
I'm so late. I'm going to miss breakfast.
Easy noodles.
The kids are hungry after soccer.
Easy noodles.
I've got to pull an all-nighter.
Easy noodles. Easy noodles, instant, anytime, anywhere. Try it for yourself.
The Voice of the Cape, 91.3 FM stereo.
Guidance from Allah, shown up on the earth as a beacon of light.
Beautiful sounds of Noor with the track Guidance from Allah. And indeed, that's something we're currently seeking and constantly seeking, and that is guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the right decisions. I'm in studio with a host of presenters from VSC, and then also a special guest, Mr. Qasim Rafique, who himself is a professional relationship coach, as well as someone who has been heavily into the field of NLP, neurolinguistic programming, life coaching, and we're talking about the conundrums that we find ourselves in today, as particularly as males, but as a Muslim society. I believe that Danielle Matthew had a little question he wanted to pose on the subject.
Shukran, Fasik. Assalamu alaikum, Hakeem, Qasim. It's quite interesting to hear your perspective in regards to the 3 groups. Of course, the first group being far more religiously conscious and then going to their parents. And then the second group, of course, the one that you mentioned that was most prevalent in terms of seeking, of course, forgiveness from Allah, and then turning to parents and then seeing which way they actually want to go, whether they want to proceed or not. And I think for me, whenever you were speaking on this matter in terms of the three groups, especially the third group, it brings to question the idea, or rather the prevalency of secret marriages in our community.
Yes.
It seems to be a thing wherein individuals that are so lost in love, as they would say, a Romeo and Juliet situation, wherein they simply ignore the reality of their parents, even though it's quite clear in terms of what the parents' role and the respect we should owe them. But they seem to just ignore that, and in their headstrongness, and as you mentioned, their emotional attachment and at times physical attachment, they just discard their religious beliefs or their religious standing to just head on into this thing without completely understanding what they're getting into. So I want to know your perspective on that kind of reality that is kind of raising or being more prevalent in our community.
See, there's two sides of that, and the first thing is that secret marriage is obviously happening when it's their first marriage, but they're hiding it from the parents. But there's also secret marriages when men are married and they have been for 10, 15, 20 years, and they have a secret wife that they haven't mentioned. So that's another topic in its own. But what you're talking about, what you're asking about just now, is that the secret marriages situation. It's happening because it's all to do with breaking down of boundaries when it comes to understanding attachment. People don't understand attachment. People call it love, but in reality, from a relationship science perspective, it's just an attachment. And if you ever study, like the brain now, for instance, we have the prefrontal cortex, we have the amygdala, and the parts of the brain, if you actually study brain scans that highlight when you've formed an attachment, or people say love, it's the same areas of that dopamine area region that's been highlighted in brain scans that a cocaine addict has. So what does that show you? It shows you that an attachment or falling in love is a serious addiction. And that's what happens. This is why I said to you in the beginning, I said, the moment you formed an emotional attachment during the courting stage, I say that we should have a t-shirt saying it's game over. Because you can't actually see what you're doing now. You will start to make excuses for that person. That's exactly what happens when people get to a position where they formed an attachment, which leads to a physical attachment, and then they have a cultural or a religious family who they've hid all this from. Then guess what happens? When you're in that heightened state, you're going to do things that are not rational. And that's where all of this stuff is coming from. It's coming from a place of irrational behavior, because you are in a state of addiction and you have a fear. And this is one of the problems with modern day parenting, especially from a cultural perspective, is that we as parents have made it very difficult for us to be able to connect with our children, where they feel safe, that they can be vulnerable with their fathers and with their mothers and not be degraded or scolded. Or do you understand? I mean, we're living in if I tell you some of my clients, what they come and what they say to me, you'll be shocked. Like the blood will literally drain from your skin. Like there's parents there that don't even talk about the birds and the bees, and they just leave them. Why? Because they're like, in Urdu they say, oh, we can't speak about these things. Then like, we can't even discuss these matters with our children because it's ape, it's this. This is a sort of like mentality. Then what ends up happening is our children grow up, they can't be vulnerable, they're scared to actually express any interest, so they end up doing extreme measures, because once they fall in love, it's like I said, it's an addiction. And this is where all these secret marriages are popping up, and especially in this day and age, it's a palette. And like I said, underneath it all, what's pushing it and driving it is this over-sexualized society. And again, because of the access that we have on our smart tech.
You know, interestingly enough, you've spoken about the importance of the parents' role in raising kids. And sometimes I think parents think, well, I gave you an education, I sent you to madrasa, I paid for your for your studies, university. You should be sorted. Should be okay. Not understanding that kids also need that relationship with the parent.
Absolutely.
They need that guidance. They need to understand from an Islamic perspective, outside of the parents' own feelings and emotions, from an Islamic perspective, what is required of them, and what ultimately would train this identity that they need to develop going forward. But because it's people's expectations and parents' expectations, and not looking at what Allah's Subhanahu's expectations are for us, that sometimes we have a situation where the harmony is disturbed in the home, and people are left wondering what went wrong when it's right in front of them all the time. Ayub?
Well, Fasih, I've got a question, and being a young single Muslim, I think I'm the young one in the room.
Are you advertising?
No, I've got a question with
He's playing chess on radio.
I've got one with regards to technology has taken over, social media has taken over, but also I think that to the extent some people even go to the extent of using dark arts.
Yes.
It's either to get between people or to get what they want out of it. Do you think this is a reality?
It's a reality that I used to, and I'm ashamed to say this, but I used to sort of like not take it seriously many, many years ago, until I started getting cases coming through, and until I had so many cases at one point, I had to sit down with the ulama and actually have a discussion about these cases. And then I realized the reality of what was going on. Let me give you a quick example of some of the things that are going on, especially within our communities. I had a couple that came to me, a husband and wife team, both in tears on the phone, both of them, and asked them what's going on. And he said, I got married. I've been married for just under a year. My mum is a widow. She was extremely jealous of my wife. And so what she did was that she went off to Pakistan, went and saw what they call a hakim, which means a herbalist. That's what she said to him. I need to see her. Comes back, invites her son and her daughter-in-law to the house and says, look, drink this tonic. It's really, really good for your health. And listen to this. This blew me away. And I had to actually speak to a couple of our ulama in my community regarding this. And what ended up happening was that he drinks this, and then that morning, about 3 a.m, his wife then came on. She started saying, my husband woke up in a fetal position in the bed, crying like a child, asking for his mum. And then at the crack of dawn, he left, and it's been going on for 3-4 months. He goes and he just sits with his mum until he's lost his job. Our relationship is suffering. All of this is happening. And when the mother found out, because they said basically they started questioning, and we've lost it. My husband's lost his job. This has happened. Do you know what's going on? She broke down because she realized what she'd done, and she admitted. She said, I went to a sahar, a magician in Pakistan, and the only reason I got this done for you was because I was missing your company. Listen to this. I was missing your company, and I never wanted you to spend so much time with your wife. I wanted you just to give me a little bit more attention. Can you imagine a mother's just done sihr on her son, who now has lost his job, losing his relationship, and he's now glued to his mum because the magic has gone wrong. This is like some of the stuff that I'm dealing with. And then you have other stuff about people trying to break up marriages, people doing this. And remember, all of this is kufr. This is utter kufr. And so we have a plethora of this. And even in the United Kingdom, and even when I was here, I've been in South Africa for a while now on tour with my wife. And as you know, my wife, Yasmin Mujahid, she's been touring around. So we've been in Durban, Johannesburg, Cape Town. And we've heard so many people come to us and saying that it's like a business here. People have a side business doing stuff like this. And this is what I'm saying. It's that these are some of the things that we have to be very careful about, our cultures and backward mentality, and not understanding what Islam actually says about these issues.
Shukran, Qasim, and I think you've given beautiful advice, your experience traveling the globe and getting understanding of what is really happening. But I think also we've got, what do we say to the parents that are listening now? They've got teenagers that needs to get married. And I know there's not one tablet for everyone or one shoe fits everyone. But what is the best advice? Because I know our time is running out very quickly. What is the best advice as a coach that you can give to parents and to say, this is sort of the age group that you need to tackle your kids and what do you say to them?
The best advice I can give just now would be that just follow the prophetic model. The prophetic model is that for the first 7 years, love your child unconditionally. And there's child psychologists now. There's research papers about this now. So the first 7 years, give unconditional love. For the next 7 years, up to the age of 14, give tarbiyah. My son, my daughter, this is right, this is wrong. Do this, do that. Do you understand? Give them the tarbiyah. And then from the ages of 14 up to 21, be there, become their best friend. And that's the part that I want to latch on to, is you need to become their best friend. If you cannot have a conversation, or your son or daughter feels shy, or they feel that they're going to be sort of like squished in any form of idea or any form of communication that they want to have with you, whether it's to do with marriage or their future or education or whatever, if they're not going to have a healthy conversation with you and they can't be vulnerable with you, you've already lost your child. You want to know why? Because they're going to use and utilize different forms of escapism, and they're going to go to other people to get their advice. Why? Because for you, a lot of parents nowadays do this. I want you to basically be like your cousin. I want you to become either a doctor. I want you to become a hafiz. I want you to go to a Darul Uloom. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. All these things structured for their entire life. But I've had so many people that have graduated from Darul Ulooms. They come to me before marriage and after marriage. And I've had grown men who are students of knowledge and who are imams now in tears because they said that my father's never hugged me. My father's never hugged me. I've got people who are graduates from Darul Ulooms coming to me now who have porn addiction. Because why? Because they're lacking that love and connection with their mother and father, because they've got thrown into a system of just do, rules, but no empathy, no compassion, no connection, no attachment to their parents. Why? Because that's not the to-do thing. That's not what my parents did to me. So actually what it is it's a lot of, it's called, in psychology, it's called generational trauma, where parents are just modeling what their parents have done. I have people come to me who are saying that my mother and father for the last 20 years have been sleeping in separate bedrooms, and there's no relationship there, and we've grown up in that environment. So when they get married, their wives are on the phone saying, why can my son not regulate his emotions? Why is he so stoic? Why can he be vulnerable? And when you do a psychological timeline on the man, he breaks down and says, that's what I watched my dad do.
Childhood.
That's what I'm watching my dad. That's what my dad did.
Well, I think on that note, we're going to take a break quickly. When we come back, we've got a few more minutes. We're talking to Mr. Qasim Rafique, and we're talking about important issues within the home, within the family. And of course, today we have VOC presenters in studio with us, all male, as the topic is from a male's perspective. We'll be back right after this.
Hey Maron, if you're craving awesome pastas, sumptuous salads and gourmet wood-fired pizzas, bring your family and friends to Kolkakyo Canal Walk at Shop 167 via entrance 3 or 7. Open 7 days a week until 9 p.m. It is the only halal-certified Kolkakyo in the Western Cape. Please call 021 5511 658 for bookings and more info.
Kolkakyo Canal Walk have some amazing deals to warm you this winter. On Mondays, one kid eats for free per dining adult. And the Tuesday trio means that for any 3 pizzas, pastas or salads you order, you get the cheapest one for free. Also at lunchtimes from Monday to Thursday, order any classic pizza and a soft drink for only 119 Rand. T's and C's apply.
And we're back. Mr. Smith from Stellenbosch writes, I'm forever painting, but can never get the colours right. My wife always knows better. Well, Mr. Smith, speak to the Plascon paint experts at Timbuild, your local hardware, timber, board and building material store. They can mix, tint or colour match your paint and are exclusive stockists of the Plascon Easy Living range. Your wife will love it. Google them, Timbuild in Woodstock, Stellenbosch and Somerset West, or go to timbuild.co.za.
As South Africa's #1 supermarket, ShopRite goes out of its way to partner with local communities so they can thrive.
Hi, I'm Samira from Simpsons Reaching Out to the Needy. We would like to thank ShopRite for the 12,000 Rand donation. We really appreciate it. Thank you, ShopRite. Thank you.
Nominate your favorite community project by dialing *120*189# and help ShopRite act for change in your community. Act for change. Just another way ShopRite serves communities across South Africa every day. USSD charged at 20 cents for 20 seconds. T's and C's apply. 3 minutes don't fly.
The Voice of the Cape, 91.3 FM stereo.
لمع البرق اليماني عن حبيب قد سباني فتذكرت اجتماعا فشجاني ما شجاني لمع البرق اليماني.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the program. We've got about 5-6 more minutes left in it with Mr. Qasim Rafique. We're talking about the whole issue that pertains to the family, the home, but from a male's perspective. We've spoken before the break about pornography, also pornography addiction and how that's destroying our society. But then there's another question that comes up, and this is around the whole issue of identity. We're speaking about masculinity, so let's speak about male identity. There are a lot of challenges to Muslims these days in terms of people talking about us being backwards in our thinking in so many aspects of life. As we know, Islam is a way of life, but particularly when it comes to framing gender identity. In Islam, we have a very, very, set view of what that is. But as we've mentioned, in Western society, there seems to be a shift in terms of thinking, and it's starting to kind of come into the traditional Muslim spaces as well.
Yes, sadly that is the case. There's a lot of, especially the younger generation, who are starting to get really confused by all of this sort of like huge international campaign, I'll call it. I personally believe it's a huge social experiment, and it's definitely the elastic band is going to burst at one point, or the bubble will burst, and everything's going to implode. And people, to be honest, one of the good signs is that people around the world now, Muslim and non-Muslims, are starting to stand up and say, hold on, now we've gone to a completely different level, plateau, and people are now starting to really fight back, and they're forming movements. I just recently listened to a podcast of British lawyers, non-Muslim lawyers, who are now going and trying to sue the education department for teaching 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds about masturbation, and about if you feel like to girls, if you feel like a boy, then tell us and we'll handle it. If to a boy, if you want to be like a girl, you want to wear lipstick, they're teaching these things now, and there's people standing up. So what we need to do is we need to take a step back and realize that, like you mentioned, our faith is a way of life. And the most important understanding about the faith is that it's there to preserve the sanctity of the family unit. And everything else outside that is there geared to destroy the family unit. And so, and by the way, that works in both ways. I don't know if you've realized, but because people talk so much about feminism, we also now have an extreme male version, which is a red pill movement. And now, so what's happening is that they're saying, forget women, let's never get married. Us men can just do whatever we want. Like, there's an extreme now. And then in the middle of all of this, there's this huge dawah campaign about changing people's identity. What we need to do now is we need to take a step back. We need to start educating our children from a very young age. Long gone are the days where we used to say, oh, when they grow up, they'll learn themselves, or we'll send them to madrasa. No. What you do is, I have 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds whose parents are now coming to me saying that they were kind of slightly introverted. So when they were in school, they were a little bit bullied. And so what ended up happening was that there was this entire movement in school who embraced them. And 6 months on now, the young girl wants to be a boy. You understand? Because this movement is there with open arms saying, we will embrace you, whatever you are. So if the parents now aren't sitting down and actually teaching the children about the birds and the bees and about what our faith-based principles are, if you're not doing that, don't expect the madrasas to do it. Don't expect your public schools to do it. We have now ulama around the world from America who are saying, I would not recommend sending children to public schools. It's like a conveyor belt. It's like you go in, you come out completely brainwashed. So what does that mean? It means that we now need to stick to our faith-based principles. And that means that parents need to get rid of this cultural baggage that they have of, we're not allowed to talk about these things. These things are ape, like it's sinful, it's this, is dirty, it's that. We can't, you need to wake up, because if you don't do that, I'll tell you who teach your children when they're 12, 13-year-old, the porn industry, the LGBT movement, or some other movement out there will actually groom your child to a new methodology if you do not ground them with understanding the basic principles of our faith, and then the birds and the bees, and about marriage and the sanctity and the wholesomeness of marriage. This is a time that we must do that. We cannot neglect our children. You are basically throwing them into a lion's den. If you, because you come from a Pakistani culture, an Indian culture, Bangladeshi culture, thinking we can't teach that, our parents never talked about this, our grandparents never talked about this, then you will suffer the consequences if you don't.
And I think what a way to leave it, particularly in a society that we find ourselves today that is worlds apart from the time that our parents grew up in, with so many more different challenges. The responsibility really comes down to the parents. And in society as well, but to parents, because it's that microcosm of society.
Absolutely.
And you've really got to put in the effort there. I mean, you're shining up your car to make it look beautiful outside. You tending your garden to make it look beautiful, but how you're tending the hearts of your kids.
Could I just I'm sorry to cut. Can I just say this before I lose this train of thought? That we as parents will go and we'll study, go to university and get our degrees, our masters, our PhDs. We'll go to work, get educated within our careers with what their demands are, what their wants are. If we're involved with a sport, we'll go and understand that sport or that martial art. Or if anything that we do, we have to go through a process. It's now time that the Muslims, wherever we are, now start investing in understanding how to parent effectively. There's so much work now out there by child psychologists who are talking about positive psychology, positive parenting, and we need to start investing some time, especially if you're a new couple and you're starting out in the family route. You must study how to raise a child and how to give your child emotional intelligence, how to, you need to be able to understand parenting and attachment theory. You need to understand this stuff. It's like the bread and butter of walking into this life of marriage. You cannot walk in blindsided, because if you do that, you can cause your son or your daughter years of mental health issues because of your own issues that you haven't dealt with.
Mr. Qasim Rafique, shukran so much for joining us and enlightening us. We hope we'll see you many more times in studio as you continue to visit Cape Town, South Africa.
Thank you so much.
You've got quite a taste for the cuisine now.
It's lovely. The boerewors and the samp is amazing.
You didn't have porn yet.
Indeed.
I will not forget biltong, I'll tell you that much.
You can find him on www.qasimrafique.com and also Instagram, Qasim_Rafique_Scottish. Just search and you'll find his details there. Shukran so much, and shukran so much to the guys for coming into the studio and sharing their thoughts as well, and to you, the listener, for tuning in. I bid you wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.